This session is going to focus on Copilot improvements and introductions in the newest Wave release. One of these introductions actually is something called Copilot agents. The three areas of the system that I'll focus on with the new Copilot features are general application, sales, and purchasing. Microsoft often releases videos and information on these different Copilot features, but I always like to go in the system and try them out for myself and just see how they work in real life and real environment scenarios. Let's take a look at some of the ways that Copilot is being promoted in the general application. First is an option to summarize with Copilot. I would like to show some examples of this in Business Central. This Summarize with Copilot option will be available as a new summary fact box display on card and document pages, things like the customer card, sales order, item. In this customer card example, I can see my Copilot summary preview to the right. I did already click to generate this because it takes a little bit of time the first time that you complete this summary. If I look at the summary, mostly it's showing me information that I already see on my screen here. It's just showing it in a more condensed view. If I click on a Show More, that will load in the Copilot preview pane. And you can see I did a more earlier, but right now it's re-summarizing the information for this customer. So again, I do see a lot of the statistics from the customer card restated over here, but I do think there is some additional good information. I can see the outstanding orders, and I can also see the average collection period. So I really like this average collection period statistic, and I think that that's really valuable. I'm going to go ahead and close out of this, but I'm going to go to my item list and try this on an item. And we can see that Copilot is already loading its summary. So here with my summary loaded, I can see current inventory level, what's on purchase orders, unit price, additional information as well. So I will find most of this available on my item card, but what I do like is this is kind of pulling out the key points on this item. Again, I can do a Show More, and that will show me some additional information in the Copilot chat pane. And if I look through this, the piece of information here that I really like is the last modification made to the item, and it does indicate that there is no bill of materials associated with it. So this information can be valuable from a high-level standpoint if you don't want to go through the item card or document and pick out the pieces of information. Another Copilot introduction is autofilling fields. The autofill can be used on either new or existing records. It is available for fields in card and document pages, meaning things like customers, items, and again, custom pages that you might have at your company. In the description of this functionality, Microsoft indicates that the suggestions Copilot gives are based on your company data and looking at recently used values or frequently used values. It is still up to the user to decide whether to move forward with that recommendation, but Copilot will suggest what that field maybe should be. I'm creating a new customer in Business Central, and I can actually see that the little sparkle icon, as Microsoft describes it, pops up for Copilot. But I'll fill in my customer name manually. I won't add an IC partner code, so let's go to the credit limit field. I'm going to go ahead and click on the Copilot option. I can see that Copilot came up with two suggestions. It didn't fill in the credit limit, but it did fill in a suggested salesperson code and a suggested document sending profile. With a Cronus environment, we only have a small handful of customers. So probably if there was more information for Copilot to look at, it might have better suggestions. Regardless, I can choose whether to keep these values or to clear them out. So the little checkbox will accept the suggestion, and the X will clear out that suggestion, and then I can select the correct option. While I do like this option, I also think that we can still use customer templates and master data templates effectively to fill out a lot of the information that might be the same from time to time. And creating different templates can also be an easy way to populate different values in those different master data creations. I think that as Copilot can be trained more on this master data, that it will be effective as far as suggesting things like a credit limit. In the Microsoft documentation, they also note that later in the Wave, Copilot will be able to automatically search the web for more information and suggest things for customers and vendors such as contact details, product codes, and other similar fields that could come from public information that's online. Let's take a look next at Copilot with Sales. Microsoft has introduced a sales order agent through Copilot, and this requires a very minimal amount of setup. We'll be looking at things like email setup, user access, and then simply activating the agent. As a user, we can check the agent tasks and we can take action on those so we can have the agent follow up and send emails that it's suggested. And additionally, we can also create those sales documents in Business Central and have them emailed back to that customer. First, I need to activate and configure the sales order agent. So if I see this little SO up here, I can click into that. I will go to activate the sales agent, and there is a little bit of setup that needs to be done. First, I am going to go into the mailbox setup. This will help set up the email for the account to be monitored, and even custom pages if you have custom pages. In this customer card example, I can see my Copilot. I'm going to select Microsoft 365, and I can go ahead and I can create that inbox. And I'll go ahead and I'll just make this my personal email for now. All right, so we can set this as default as well, and we can see that we've successfully added the email account, and we can test it if we need to. I did get the test email, so let's go ahead and let's finish. Here we have our email account, so we'll select OK. The next thing we need to do is manage the user access. So in user access, I can see that I'm already added, and we can add additional people as well if we need to. Finally, we just need to make sure that the sales order agent is active, and we can go ahead and click Update. Now I can see that my sales order agent is active, and if new tasks require attention, they'll appear here. I can see that when I activated my sales order agent and linked it to my email, I do get quite a few tasks that need attention and are recent. So just keep this in mind. If you are linking the sales order agent to an inbox that might have past emails, you might have to do a little bit of cleanup when you activate this. In my tasks, I found an email from Carrie Carosa. If I click into that, it is a customer request for 10 chairs and a table for a conference room, and it has a PO number as well. So what I can do is I can review this, or I can simply stop the task. Let's go ahead and let's review. And I can see the specifics of the email and the request. And let's confirm. Now I can see that the task is in progress because I do want my sales order agent to assist with this. I can see that the steps will appear once they're completed or ready for my review. My sales order agent has generated an email to Carrie. So in the email, it says, "Thank you for your inquiry," and then it lists the following options that we have: some chairs, some pedestals, as well as a conference table. And it does list the price as well. The only thing that might be nice to add to this is pictures of these items so that they know what they look like, but maybe they already have this information. I can also look and I can see any previous messages, and I can see any attachments. And right now there's nothing attached. Once I confirm that this email is okay to send, I can confirm, or I can just simply decide later. We're going to confirm to send this email to the customer. And again, I can see that this email was sent, and we will wait for a response where I can then take action on that task. We have a new message from the customer, so let's go ahead and let's review that. And if I scroll up, I can see that the message from the customer is that they would like to proceed with 10 Berlin chairs and 1 Antwerp table. Let's confirm that sales quote action. I can see that the task is in progress, so once the next step is ready for my review, it will appear here. I have a new task that is ready for review. And this is going to be an outgoing email that's providing the customer with the sales quote details. Thanks for your order. Here's the detail for the sales quote, total amount excluding tax, and please review if you'd like to confirm and convert this into an order. I can also see any attachments here, and here is the official sales quote from Business Central. So I will go ahead and I will confirm to send this email to the customer. And finally, the customer has confirmed that they'd like to proceed with the order request. So let's review this message and next step, and let's go ahead and confirm. I have a new email message to review. This has the same details of the order, but let's go ahead and show the attachment. This is actually the sales order confirmation as opposed to the sales quote. So now we've converted that quote into an order. Let's confirm. If I look for sales orders in my system, I can see all the way at the bottom here we have a sales order for Carrie's Cakes. If I look at the detail, this is the detail that came from the customer email. So I was able to complete this whole process without even having to open my email inbox. In general, I thought the sales order agent was very easy to configure and work through. However, I will mention that I did a pretty simple example. So I didn't test this with anything too complex, and the information that I got from the customer email was pretty clear. Additionally, the thing that I noticed the most when I connected the sales order agent is that I did have a lot of emails that were in my Copilot window as tasks for the sales order agent. So I can go through these and I can review and I can simply stop any tasks that I do not want the sales order agent to continue working on. However, I just wanted to let you know that this is one of the things that I experienced that I was not expecting, especially after watching the Microsoft demo video on this, where there was only one email in the sales order agent tasks. Overall, though, I thought this was really simple to use, and I look forward to the improvements and new introductions to the sales order agent in the future. Another functional area where Copilot and agent functionality is being expanded to is purchasing. Microsoft is introducing a payables agent. However, this payables agent will not be available for public preview until later this year. So later in 2025, we should have more information and be able to actually try this out in a preview environment. But for now, what I'd like to do is share the information that Microsoft has shared to us and pick out some key points. The first thing to review is the value that this is bringing to your business. If you look at the last sentence in this section, it notes that the payables agent allows AP professionals, clerks, and accountants to focus on more demanding tasks that boost productivity and efficiency. And what this means to me is that the payables agent is not intended to replace any position at your company or in the accounting department. It's simply to take away some of those maybe manual repetitive tasks so that your team can focus on things that are a little bit higher value. Here we can see that the payables agent first focus is operating costs or overhead expenses. The way that the payables agent will work is it will source files and attachments related to these operating or overhead expenses. The way that the agent can get those documents is by specifying either an email and the agent getting the attachments, or the agent can actually import PDF files from a SharePoint folder where invoices can be put for processing. This payables agent and this functionality will utilize the eDocuments module of Business Central. OCR will also be utilized with this payables agent. As far as entering the information in Business Central, the payables agent will create a purchase invoice. It will use relevant information like purchase history, accounting policies, and other things that are going to be set up when you activate that agent. I'm curious to see how accurate this payables agent is, and I'm curious to see what the settings are, how it learns, etc. Currently, we have recurring purchase lines, which is what I frequently use to make my invoice entry quick and consistent. However, this does still include some user intervention as far as grabbing that PDF attachment, attaching it in Business Central, setting up the vendor invoice, so on and so forth. It is the future goal that the payables agent will handle more complex scenarios and hopefully be able to also maintain more rules and more learning. It is the goal that the invoices will be able to come in through additional channels rather than just email or SharePoint documents. Also being introduced with Copilot is enhanced purchase order line matching. It is important to note that this Copilot feature is for use with the eDocuments module. Some of the capabilities being added are the ability to incorporate item references as well as GL mappings. This enhanced purchase order line matching will also highlight discrepancies for any lines that aren't on the related purchase order. And users can actually use a new action called Create Purchase Order Line to get these new lines added to the purchase order. The matching will also be maintained with those new PO lines matching to the invoice. There also will be a Create Matching rule to save any matches on lines by Copilot for a future use. This is just a screenshot that Microsoft provided in their new release documentation to show the window for the eDocument purchase order line matching. And again, remember that this is for use with the eDocuments module and functionality. I did want to talk a little bit about the agent pricing because this is a question that we commonly get when we talk to users or customers about these agents. You can see that I do have a screenshot here outlining some different messaging scenarios, and it is through the Copilot Studio that this pricing and these different scenarios happen. There is a link at the bottom of this PowerPoint slide as well if you'd like to go to the full page where this chart was, and they have some additional information there as well. Basically, for the agent pricing, we have two different billing models. We can either purchase a prepaid capacity or we can use a pay-as-you-go model. So again, I've included a link down at the bottom bottom, and it has quite a bit more information about this. So I just wanted to touch on it a little bit because, again, it is something that we commonly get asked. So I did want to put a note out there that this is not free. However, it does not seem like this will be an enormous cost based on the information that Microsoft has out there right now.
Questions from the group. I did see one come up in the chat that Carrie has answered, but I'll just repeat it. The question was, are we able to push the Copilot data from the customer card to report for an outside salesperson? Did you want to just answer that, Carrie, live?
Sure, I'll expand on that a little bit. And I also did want to add some information that I learned at Directions from attending the Microsoft sessions and just kind of chatting with them. So the answer to that question is I didn't see the option in the Copilot pane, but I would have to confirm. But kind of as an add-on to that, I know a lot of people were asking Microsoft during the Directions conference sessions just a few weeks back, just about the Copilot windows in general, because some people think that we can't do enough with them. They're not flexible like the Business Central windows normally are. We can't resize them. So I think this might be one of those things that kind of goes along with that is hopefully they'll make it easier to do more things with those Copilot window panes, such as share that information to Teams or somewhere else. The other thing that I found interesting as kind of I went through testing the sales order agent, you might have seen that I linked it to my NewView email address because that's what I use. I knew that I'd have emails going in and out of there. The thing that I didn't consider is that if the Copilot agent is reading the emails, they don't show up as unread emails for me. So for like a week, I couldn't figure out why am I missing emails? Why am I not seeing these emails that are showing as read? And I realized, oh, the Copilot agent is reading them. So that's just kind of like a little caveat or warning that just make sure you know that if you do link that agent is reading your emails. So you might not notice that there's something that you need to address. Once I figured that out, I unhooked that Copilot agent very quickly, but it was something that I hadn't expected. So that's why I always like to test through these things on my own.
Okay. We just have a comment from Shelley. She said, it kind of sounds like Microsoft is offering in-house functionality that is currently being filled without extensions, such as Continua or SPS.
Yeah, so I've thought about that a little bit as well, and I guess my thought, and I'm also curious to hear what Carrie Peters thinks, but I would say a lot of those extensions are built around the users mapping out rules. So specific mapping, OCR, this thing goes to this account. And I think that's a little bit different than Copilot because Copilot is using, AI to try and figure these things out. So of course, we still need to provide Copilot with some information, maybe things like company policies, maybe things like chart of accounts mapping. But with these, it seems Copilot is really going to be looking into what is the history, what is company policy to try and determine the best fit. Whereas I think with a lot of the add-ons or extensions, again, it's us telling the system, here's how we want things mapped. So I think that's a little bit of the difference that I see with the payables agent as far as, using the AI to try and determine that without a user having to specifically say, this is what we want to happen. Curious if, Carrie Peters has any additional thoughts on that as well.
Yeah, I think that whole situation is very interesting because I think Carrie and I were sitting next to each other at a couple of these sessions at Directions, kind of poking each other in the ribs. And some of it is replaced, but it's also in its infancy, right? So the things that I'm seeing Copilot doing well is making suggestions based off of history so that you have less decision making, and also reducing data entry. So, and along with that, having natural language queries to be able to come up with that information. So when you think about, we'll pick on any of the AP automation stuff where we've got full OCR capability to scan and route for approval and code and do three-way match, that kind of stuff. Like Copilot is in no way ready for that kind of stuff. So it's a step, I think, towards leveling those two together. But I think that The one thing that I took away from some of the recent things that we've been studying up on with Copilot agents is there's going to be a decent learning curve in the next year for everybody about agents. So if you haven't touched them, played around with them, read about them, that kind of stuff, now is the time, right? We all should have been doing that with Copilot a year ago with just understanding basic prompting. And now we're seeing that basic prompting coming in and attached to a database, either a world access database or our own encapsulated database, all of that, and being able to apply those natural language queries, and then some of this simple functionality is kind of the next step. Carrie, the question I had back from you that I was wondering about as I was watching your presentation is, what about some of the Business Central Outlook integration? Does Copilot replace that, enhance that? As I talk with more and more customers, we're talking about how they're operating in Outlook with Business Central more often, and that the transition between those two applications is becoming more seamless. In your opinion, how is Copilot adding to that and making that a different experience?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the way that I see it is this could be enhancing the integration. The integration maybe, gets the emails there, but it's really the AI agents or the Copilot agents, I'll say, that are putting that information into a usable format. And I know we've always had some variation of that, because if Business Central sees something very clearly spelled out of 10 Athens desks or whatever it may be, it can take that information and kind of put it into a sales format. But I definitely think that this is meant to enhance what we currently have with the integration. I think I haven't used the sales order agent extensively. I just kind of did the testing in this video, but the things that I, again, found surprising were we don't necessarily want that agent to pay attention to all emails. So I think the question I have is, how do we get that agent to learn the things that we want it to pay attention to versus what we don't? And then I think my other question is, how do we make sure that the things that the sales order agent shouldn't pay attention to, how do we make sure that a human is actually able to see those emails and review them? So those were kind of the two things in my mind where I didn't quite get the distinction of how we can train the agent to make that distinguishment. But I do definitely think it enhances what we have there currently. The other thing I just kind of wanted to mention is, Carrie, you said that you think it might be good for things like looking at history, making suggestions. And I know in one of the sessions at Directions, Soren even mentioned Copilot and AI in general is really good at skimming through things and bringing you back information that's mostly right? Giving a good recommendation. But when it comes to something like accounting, that's rule-based. So something can't just be 95% right, it has to be 100% right. And that's where they mentioned that that's the piece they're trying to figure out, is how do we make this more rules-based instead of just go find your best suggestion? Because for accounting, it can't just be a best suggestion, it has to be right.
Yep.
Okay, great. Any other questions before we move on? No? Okay.